election processes. Of course, this year there were international observers here for the first time, and I suspect that that was just a reaction to some questions that were raised about the fairness of the process. However, that may have been more a case of complacency on the part of the electorate and those who see after the election than corruption. It is either or, you can take your pick. I go on the side of complacency, sir. The stability of this democracy, Mr. President, is buttressed by the seemingly non-existent ideological divide between the two major political parties, which have contested our elections and whose representatives have led this country over the near 60 years post-independence. This lack of clear delineation between our parties has been one of our greatest strengths, as I've said before. It is one of our greatest strengths because it gives political actors the opportunity to move from one side to the next and nestle into the other as though they were there all the time. The veracity of this assertion is there for all to see at present. It's there in the cabinet, it's there in the other place, and it's there around this table. I sat for 7 years in this place hearing about the lost decade, sir. I'll say no more. However, sir, as I've also cautioned this place, our greatest strength can prove to be our greatest weakness if people perceive that there's an elite political class of people who look after themselves, that pat each other's back while using the masses as pawns in an electoral process. In such a situation, the people can become disillusioned and refuse to participate in what they may perceive to be a farce. Or as cultural ambassador, the most honorable Anthony Gabby Carter said, politicians make a mock sport at we. And maybe that is a good place to begin our look at this bill that is before us. From the outset, it raises several questions. What are we trying to fix? Or as they say in another place, what is the mischief? Why so urgently? Will this fix solve the real major issues of governance confronting this parliament and this country as it is now constituted? The bill sets out as its objects and reasons to promote the stability by limiting parliamentarians' ability to cross the floor. Mr. President, permit me to go a little back in my experience in this country. I came to this country just about 40 years ago. And after a while, I was very intrigued by the political maneuverings as were described earlier. I was very concerned that the act of crossing the floor should automatically trigger a by-election, and my thought, that is what should happen. However, over time, I realized that it is just the way politics is done in this country. And it comes because, as I said, there's a lack of a clear ideological divide between the two major parties. The most recent consultations with the electorate, the general public, by way of the Parliamentary Reform Commission and the Constitution Reform Commission, have both reported majority positions for maintaining the status quo. And the Parliamentary Reform Commission, which was quoted earlier, says, the Commission does not support any barrier to or restriction on a member of Parliament crossing the floor. And it further stated, aside from potential issues of the constitutional right to freedom of association, the right to cross the floor is an important element of opposition in a democratic society. Specifically, a parliamentarian may feel that he can no longer associate with or support the political party of which he has been a member. It is in the interest of democracy that he should be free to do so. That's the Parliamentary Reform Commission. There's a minority opinion in that report, which I'm sure we will hear later, because I believe the crafter of that minority opinion is in this chamber with us. In essence, what I've highlighted, sir, is that there's no groundswell from the people for this apparent urgent amendment. In fact, The majority opinion of the Parliamentary Reform Commission and the Constitutional Reform Commissions align with the Commonwealth Latimer House principles on the three branches of governance, which was founded in 2003. I believe it was quoted in the other place. And this was agreed to by law ministers throughout the Commonwealth at their heads of government meeting in Abuja, Nigeria in 2003, between December 5th and December 8th. And Barbados was represented by no less significant a person than the Honorable Owen S. Arthur, who was Prime Minister at the time. And if you'll permit me to quote from that document, sir, Section 3, Clause 2 states, under the clause, security of members during their parliamentary term is fundamental to parliamentary independence, and therefore, the expulsion of members from Parliament as a penalty for leaving their parties or floor crossing should be viewed as a possible infringement of members' independence. Anti-defection measures may be necessary in some jurisdictions to deal with corrupt practices. Now, I do not believe that Barbados has any corrupt practices, sir. I would hate to think so. Not with a party that has led it with a majority for 3 terms. While I believe that the practice of crossing the floor can be disrespectful to the electorate, given Barbados's history of the practice, I believe that compulsory expulsion at this time would create more instability than stability. I'll elucidate on this later. During the last session of Parliament, sir, I believe it was March 15th, 2022, and I remember it very well for something else that happened on the 19th. On that occasion, we received a bill for amendment of the Constitution. And in a nutshell, it was to create the space that the party that gained the second largest number of votes in the election will be considered the opposition, that is in a case where there is no opposition in the House, and therefore be able to place 2 members in the Senate. I opposed it at that time for a reason, because we were introducing a creature into the Constitution that was not there before, that is votes in an election. The Constitution does not recognize that. And once you start introducing votes in an election, it creates another problem, because then you have to ask yourself the question, if you are bringing this party that got the second largest number of votes, whatever they were, in an election in as the opposition, what happens to Clause 74, where the opposition is derived from the House? What happens if a member crosses the floor? The conundrum you would have had then, sir, is that somebody who got 1,500 or 2,000 votes in an election could have crossed the floor and, according to Clause 74, become the leader of the opposition, while there's another clause that places a group here that it calls the leader of the opposition on 20,000 or more votes. It would have created a constitutional conundrum. That was shelved, thank goodness. Mr. President, what would have solved the problem at the time, as I believe will solve the problem at this time, but I was assured then that Acts 2 and verse 46 was very much in place in the other house, that they were all in one accord. It turns out they were in a SWIFT. But I was told they were all in one accord, sir, and nobody was crossing the floor. So, that aside. And we know what came out of that, sir. What I believe would have helped there at that time is if a clause had been introduced or some measure had been introduced that suspended the enactment of Section 74 of the Constitution in a case where there's no opposition in the House. It would have solved the problem, and it probably can solve whatever problem you're trying to solve here as well. But I want us to pay close attention to what is really being said here. It means that if a person disagrees with his caucus in Parliament and crosses the floor and no longer wishes to be a part of that, it should automatically trigger a by-election. Now, this is the first because it means that such a person may well be on the side of right. We are assuming here that the majority is always right. What happens if a parliamentary group is going down a rabbit hole that can lead to the destruction of our country, and one person jumps up and says, "Do not go there"? He should be put out. And I know that we allow the space for the by-election and so on, but we know what will happen, sir. We know when the juggernaut of the party's machinery gets on the ground, everything falls apart. Let's not fool ourselves. And I'll speak to that after this. Our history does not support the urgency of this bill on the grounds on which it is presented. It doesn't. But that is not the most serious part of the bill for me. If we want to have by-elections and when people cross the floor, that's not a big thing. The devil in the details in this particular piece of legislation comes in the section 45(1)H that is being proposed to be inserted. That section states, sir, Section 45(1) states, the seat of a member of a House of Assembly shall become vacant, and there are regulations A to G, which the Constitution provides for that, but H, it shall become vacant if he, having been a candidate of a political party and elected to the House as a candidate of that political party, is expelled by that party or crosses the floor. As I said, sir, the devil is in the details. It is true that enshrined in the Constitution in Section 21, the Constitution says that people have a right to association and a right to join a political party. Thus, the Constitution recognizes that there are such things as political parties. However, what the Constitution does not do, it does not care to know the parties. It does not care to know you. It does not know the tenets of the party. It does not know the rules for the membership or expulsion from membership of the party, because they're not enshrined in the Constitution. And that is fine where the Constitution is concerned. And this creates the biggest challenge in this bill, because the danger in Section 45(1)H is that is being inserted here is that it gives a political party, which the Constitution does not know, a ghost institution to the Constitution, the right to remove a seated MP in accordance with its own tenets, while the Constitution does not know it. And I believe that Senator Cummings gave a very compelling reason why this should not pass when she described the debacle in George Street a few years ago. That is the stability we're offering here. There seems to be a deliberate ambiguity in Section 45(1)H in that it mentions elected to the House as a candidate of that political party. I do not believe that the ambiguity is by guile, but in recognition of the delicate balancing act of the difference between a candidate and a representative. They're two different species. Political parties do not produce representatives. If they did, we would not have elections. Political parties present candidates to the electorate. And the electorate then determines who the representative will be. Once the candidate is chosen, elected by the people, he ceases to be a candidate of the political party and becomes a representative of the people. The representative is therefore a servant of the electorate and not the political party. And therefore, it almost seems like overstepping one's boundaries or a power grab to believe that a political party, that the general counsel of a political party the configuration of which the Constitution does not know, can remove a seated representative of the people. The reasoning being presented for this is that the candidate runs on a party ticket, and then the votes that are procured by the candidate are really the votes of the party. Sounds plausible. I do hope that we disabuse our minds of so myopic a view of the electorate. The reality is that there's a confluence of factors that goes into the election of a representative. Not everybody who votes for a representative agrees with the party they're put there by. Some people hold their noses and vote simply because they have to or they feel they need to. Some people actually despise the party, but they might like the candidate. They vote for the representative because he or she may be the lesser of two evils in their eyes. But it doesn't mean that the party can hold on to those votes and claim the votes of the people as the votes of the party. I believe that Senator Cummings gave us a wonderful example of this through her canvassing in St. John, where people rejected the candidate. They might have supported the party, but they weren't going to vote for the party just because it put a candidate there. Their choice was made based on the candidate. I've said several times before, sir, that the role of a political party and the role of a government are by nature two different things. Totally different. The role of a political party is to present candidates for an election, well, one of their roles, and to decimate their opposition, as the juggernaut of the Barbados Labour Party has shown is very competent to do. However, those candidates being elected then become representatives of the people in the parliament of the country, and who will be governed by the rules of expulsion of the Constitution as set out in section 45(1)(a) to G. The representatives are expected to carry out the mandate of the government, and the government is there to cater to the needs of all the people. A political party is not designed to do that, just by the design, just by the nature. The party presents candidates, the people produce representatives. A representative by nature of his origin ought not be subject to the tenets of a political party. He may be a member of the party, and therefore, as a member, can be expelled from the party. But as a representative of the people, it should never be. Not in a stable democracy like ours. And additionally, sir, this brings into the discussion the potential of abuse of the system. Abuse of the system where certain MPs can be targeted and have their lives disrupted and their representation of the people truncated by the machinations of a political party. A representative should have the right to be cantankerous. A representative should have the right to be eager. A representative should even have the right to be a despot if they want to be. It is a given, sir, that political parties are some of the most volatile institutions in the society. And it's just by nature of their construct. And so, for all the lovely things that we've been hearing, all political parties have their inner struggles. And those inner struggles should not be brought to bear on the parliament that the people have put in place. You know, I would hate to think that the AI image that I heard some 2 years ago where one person was saying, we're not paying this lawyer because if he represents this person, what will happen to that? And then you end up seeing, I know it's AI because I see the same people in the party now. So it must be AI. It can't be nothing else, sir. And as I said, sir, I sat in this parliament for 7 years. And all I hear is the lost decade and the diabolical actions, da, 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 da. Look around the table, sir. Look in cabinet. Stability? A political party? And I'll even take it further. Add the great elephant in the room, campaign financing. Sir, I've asked before, and I'll ask again. I can't get an answer. You see, our political system is like a game of musical chairs. But I can't find out who the DJs are at all. Somebody playing the music and I can't find out who it is. But we know the DJs determine when people sit and when they won't. What are we introducing here? A case where a DJ can now pick out a representative and decide not he? We have to take it to its logical conclusion, sir.
Or its illogical
It's not. We always have to prepare. We always have to prepare for Exodus 1 and verse 8. Critical portion in the Old Testament. There arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. There may arise a political party that don't care about anything we're doing here. And we don't know what their tenets are because we're about to pass a legislation that says you don't need to know them. And they can remove people who the people have elected. I'm not imputing motive to any party or any group here, sir. But I do not believe it is in the interest of a democracy to give power in the Constitution to a ghost institution where nobody knows its tenets, nobody knows how its leadership is chosen, and we should not give that institution the opportunity to unseat a member of parliament. The Constitution removes members of parliament not by the tenets of political parties, but by what is enshrined there, no matter how popular the party may be. Back to the Latimer principle, sir. Under the same section 2 that speaks to the security of members of parliament, Part D says the cessation of a member of a political party of itself should not lead to the loss of a member's seat. And I again raise the question, what is the urgency here? And I dare say that this is not the time for us to be passing this legislation. I know I heard about the 92-0, the 330 loves and all those things, but look at the numbers carefully, sir. In 2018, when the ruling party won, they gained at least over 112,000 votes, which represented 40% of the electorate at the time. By 2026, when everything is tabulated, it's quite possible that the number of votes garnered by the ruling party at this time will be less than what it gained when it lost the election in 2013. And amounts to just about 28% of the electorate. Sir, I urge us not to create an adversarial system where there is none. As I said, Senator Cummings gave a very compelling argument why this legislation should not be passed, and I think we should listen to her. She gave a very good argument for recalling the vote as well, which is probably where we should be looking. Where if a member crosses the floor, that the constituents have the opportunity to recall the vote and leave it there. Let the constituents determine whether the person will sit or not. I know we're going to by-election and so on, but let us put that little buffer in there and just leave it there. Because we do not have an adversarial system at this time, and I do not believe we should be creating one. Do not weaponize our politics. Barbados has existed in the way that it has, as I said, as the current House and Cabinet and this Senate is constructed. It shows that we have a political maturity to get past these things. Let us not weaponize and create elections where they need not be. As the mighty Gabby said, let us not try to quell an unexistent rebellion. I like Calypso, sir. And I would close my words with some words from Edmund Burke, the great British parliamentarian who was quoted in the other place in another instance. And this would be advice to the ruling party at this time. Because half a dozen grasshoppers hidden under a fern make the field ring with the noise of their importunate chink, while hundreds of great cattle sit quietly in the shade of an English oak, chewing the cud and are silent, pray do not imagine that those making the noise speak for all the inhabitants of the field. I thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers. Speakers? Senator Sloan.
Mr. President, I rise for the first time as the youngest senator in this chamber and in that of the other place as well. Sir, let me say, like a young batsman walking out for his first test, as I prepare, I recognize the weight of responsibility. Sir, I recognize the weight of expectation. But sir, I'm not daunted. I'm confident in my preparation. As I now face the proverbial first ball, we will call that a heavy ball, sir. Recognizing that this is a constitutional amendment. And by virtue of all the discussion that has happened in this country, it is a heavy ball, a controversial ball. But sir, I shall, with no hesitation, in this chamber, take you and the public on this first innings with me. Permit me, Mr. President, however, as customary amongst independent senators and all senators on their maiden address, to recognize that I stand upon the shoulders of my family, that in particular of my grandmother, sir. And if you would permit, I do request to invoke her name, Pauline Hall. Sir, my grandmother has been a force within my life, and she has been my moral compass. And I would recognize the values that she instilled in me to guide how I treat to debates in this chamber. Mr. President, I stand knowing that equally, there are a significant number of Barbadians who, from my childhood, growing up in the eyes of the public, repose a sense of confidence in my ability Some may argue in that of my ability to sing. But I am now using my voice for another reason, sir. Sir, I shall utilize this opportunity to be a voice of reason. I shall not renege on the commitment to be just, to be fair, and to be reasonable in my conduct, sir. As I said mere moments after taking my oath of office, to whom much is given, much is expected. Sir, so as I make my contribution today, this afternoon, allow me to premise for the general understanding of all, and in particular that for the knowledge of all members in this chamber, and quite frankly, sir, in the other place. When I rise, Your Honor, I am not an emissary, a proxy, advocate. Sir, I'm not a surrogate of any political institution or any entity in this country. I shall speak, sir, without fear, and I shall speak without favor. And at times, sir, against the will of some in this chamber, I shall sing in harmony, and at times, like a good Anglican boy I was raised to be, I shall sing the descant too. But sir, the matter at hand. Mr. President, I am desirous of first stating from the outset that this amendment has introduced the complexity of constitutional matters. It is no secret that there has been robust public debate. We hear it on the radio stations, we hear it when we walk the streets, we recognize it when we interact in places common to most Barbadians. And sir, I have heard members in the other place try to relegate this constitutional amendment, and by virtue of their own words, a no-brainer exercise. Sir, quite frankly, any constitutional amendment could never be a no-brainer exercise. It is a serious matter, and the intelligence of Barbadians, sir, I certainly for naught will insult. This amendment, at its core, has serious implications for the parliamentary architecture, sir, of our democracy. And I am equally concerned that the lane of this amendment has been an invitation for those to engage in political expediency. Sir, they have used this amendment all over as if it is a political football. And as a young man, I am troubled, sir. I want to say that I treat to all legislations or all forms of amendments of any form of legislation in a way that I am sure yourself and Her Honor, the Deputy President, will be most familiar with. Sir, clarity of thought, sense of purpose, expected outcomes. It is the methodology I will utilize now, sir, to examine this amendment. Clarity of thought. Let us first ask, sir, what is the mandate? At the core of this amendment is a profound question. Sir, when a citizen casts a vote in a general election, what exactly are they choosing? When a citizen, sir, casts a vote in a general election, what exactly are they choosing? In our Westminster derived system, sir, it is well known that citizens vote in single-member constituencies. In 1971, if my memory serves correct, it was the abolition of the dual-member constituency system. But, sir, we must not pretend as if it is a pure individual contest, divorced from political parties. When we go to the polls to vote, yes, we see a name of an individual, but often that individual is associated, sir, with a political institution. We recognize, however, that some would exercise their constitutional right, and they will contest that election as an independent. Sir, but in the practical reality, campaigns are organized by political parties, sir. Manifestos are issued by political parties, sir. Leadership teams, sir, are chosen by the political party. Governance programs and policies are presented by the political party. A general election in most places happen with the understanding that political parties are a core part of the architecture of an election campaign. Sir, a candidate does not merely stand as Jamal or John or Jackie or whoever, sir. They stand on a defined platform under a recognized banner. And it is true, sir, that in other jurisdictions in the Eastern Caribbean, you would recognize that while there are great similarities in that of how our constitutions are formed, you would recognize that they too follow a similar model where individuals are elected. But when you go to the poll to vote, like in St. Lucia, you vote for Star or you vote for Flambeau. And in most of the contexts of Caribbean politics, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they vote with the key on the side, because that is the symbol of a political institution. But, sir, the truth is, there are two things on the ballot: trust in the personal integrity and the character of the individual who you're voting for. And secondly, sir, trust in the programs, policies, philosophies, whatever you want to call it, of a political institution. This is not conjecture, sir. This is observable political behavior. But, sir, what I want to draw to your attention is that clarity of thought requires us to admit that political parties are not peripheral actors. They are structural pillars of our representative democracy. So I move to clarity of thought. Why this legislation is being tabled. Let me from the outset, sir, state that I have reviewed a number of legislations made over a period of time. And it is my belief that with matters as significant as constitutional amendments, the brevity of objects and reasons is alarming to me. In fact, sir, I find it slightly offensive. Because a matter as a constitutional amendment should not be left to the speculation of the public at a time where civic participation as a result of the results of the last held general election seems to be at an all-time low. And therefore, sir, while I am not a drafter of legislation, permit me, sir, to recommend to those who hold that professional responsibility that it will be prudent to ensure you do not leave things to ambiguity. Because as I listen to all the discussions over the last few days, sir, I had quite a difficult time trying to isolate myself from the noise. Had I not spent time in quiet, in the solitude of my home, reviewing this amendment, sir, I may not have had an appreciation for its true contents. Sir, in principle, I agree with the general statement given in the objects and reasons. This bill would amend the Constitution in order to promote political stability by limiting parliamentarians' ability to cross the floor. Sir, stability. Stability ensures continuity of governance. Stability, sir, ensures the predictability of legislative majorities. Stability, confidence among citizens. Stability, confidence among investors. Confidence in public administration. Without stability, Your Honor, parliamentary arithmetic, sir, could be altered midterm by individual decisions that were never put before the electorate. Anybody could decide at any point in time, I doing what I want, as I please, without any safeguards for the interests of the electorate. So we must consider the principle involved. If a government, a collective of individual members, elected on a particular platform with a particular majority, and members subsequently realign in ways that fundamentally shift that majority, the will expressed at the polls, sir, would have been distorted. And that must be taken into consideration. This is not a theoretical concern, sir. In Commonwealth jurisdictions, floor crossing has led to sudden collapses of governments, opportunistic backdoor horse trading deals, as some authors have referred to them. Cabinet reshuffle, sir, driven by political survival, erosion of public trust, Your Honor. And might I say, a cash-in for some to get more sizable pension. Sir, the purpose of this amendment, in my view, is to say that electoral mandates are not transferable commodities. Electoral mandates are not transferable commodities. They are solemn trusts. Sir, I could agree that some may hold a different view on this, and I respect that view. But to my mind, I repeat for all to hear, electoral mandates are not transferable commodities. And therefore, sir, some with reasonable suspicion have asked or argued that this legislation would seriously abolish the independence of thought. Some may view that it criminalizes, sir, to some extent, dissent. Sir, I acknowledge, and I'm not blind to the reality, that this amendment, some have argued, that it could create the dominance of political parties. We must call a spade a spade. Sir, however, as I said from the outset, constitutional amendments are never simple matters. So, Mr. President, I acknowledge that some citizens and commentators may feel discomfort. They worry that party leadership may become too powerful. They argue, sir, that expulsion may be misused. Individual conscience, sir, may be constrained. This legislation does not assume bad faith. On my reading of this legislation, I do not assume that there's any indication of bad faith, nor should we. Democracy, sir, cannot function on the permanent presumption of ill will. We can't make amendments. We can't lay any form or draft every statute on the assumption that actors will abuse authority. Governance become impossible, sir, if we think that way solely. Therefore, sir, I choose to examine it from the perspective of constitutional systems, because they operate always on the structure of trust. Trust, sir. And some may find that this one word, hereon, may be used quite often. Trust, sir, that we have faith in our system. Trust that we have faith in our Constitution. Sir, Barbados operates under a written constitution, an entrenched Bill of Rights, the supervisory jurisdiction of the High Court and judicial review. Sir, the principles of natural justice and common law. If a party's expulsion is fundamentally unfair, based on the discussion that I have had with independent legal luminaries, the judiciary has a responsibility to protect that interest. Sir, I don't wish for the public to believe that I am solely debating this on trust, but the truth is, electors trust candidates. Candidates trust their political parties in the first instance to be on a party's ticket. Parliament trusts, and sir, you too trust the procedures of this parliament, the standing orders. The nation trusts its courts. We trust the law courts every day. If we erode trust, sir, in every institution, we erode democracy itself. If we decide that we are going to take a position that erodes the trust in every institution simultaneously, sir, we essentially erode trust in democracy itself. This legislation requires us to trust that political parties will not act recklessly. It requires us to trust that party leaders understand the gravity of expelling a sitting member. Sir, it requires us to trust the Speaker will act in accordance with the Constitution. It also requires us to trust the courts will intervene when injustice occurs. So expected outcomes now, sir. The third point. What should this legislation achieve? Sir, I have read across various jurisdictions what is perceived to be, or what could be the potential outcome of this. We recognize that an individual would go back to the polls. Some have said, why not allow an individual, like former Prime Minister, that of Barbados, Owen Seymour Alpha, to sit as an independent member of Parliament. Sir, allow me, if it is your will, to read from the Constitution of Antigua and Barbuda, and if it's necessary, sir, I will make it a document of the House.
And this is the latest version. This is
Latest
currently.
version, sir.
Thank you.
Correct. Sir, there's a reason why I don't celebrate this idea of an independent, sir. Sir, their anti-defection provisions are embedded directly within their Constitution. Section 41(1)(e). Sir, I quote, if having been elected to the House by virtue of being a member of a political party, he resigns his party whip and withdraws his allegiance from that party, provided that he shall not be required to vacate his seat so long as he remains an independent member of the House. It is possible. It is done in our other jurisdictions. But here's where the tricky part happens. Sir, let me draw to your attention that currently in the House of Parliament, in that jurisdiction, a sitting member in that country, elected on the 18th day of January in the year of our Lord 2023, under the banner of the United Progressive Party, declared on 15th of July 2024 that he had left that party and become an independent member of the House. On the 15th of July 2024, he declared that he was an independent member of that House. Sir, if my memory serves correct and my ability to read the calendar, the 16th of July 2024 is the next day. He was sworn in as a member of the cabinet of that country, sir. An independent member of Parliament sitting as a member of the cabinet of that country. So the amendment, or what this Constitution states in Antigua, it protects the status of independence, sir, but it does not bring a sense of avoidance of that of alignment. Some, if we will conclude that if we take this approach, and I certainly do, it goes back to my point of horse trading and backdoor deals, and sir, I'm not imputing anything on the part negative on that of the member in that House of Assembly. I'm just suggesting that it is possible if that stance is taken here. And I was all for the independent position days ago. But sir, it is important to note that trust in that instance was broken. As I conclude, sir, clarity of thought tells us that party affiliation is central to an electoral mandate. sense of purpose, sir, reminds us that stability and integrity in governance are constitutional goods. Expected outcome, sir, reassures us that this reform or this amendment may strengthen rather than weaken public trust. Sir, we must trust the electorate. Sir, let me say this as I close. I do not like dirty love. And that may offend some on the other side, the government side, but I do not like dirty love. In my humble view, dirty love may not have happened had a member in 2018 crossed the floor and there was a dominant political figure in this place, this chamber, sir. And I say, with all respect to the man I refer to a great individual, that of former Senator Franklin. In my mind, he was more popular than the leader of the Democratic Labour Party at the time. Everybody loved Senator Franklin then. I certainly did. I don't want to talk about snow or whatever. But the truth is, the Democratic Labour Party entered a general election then and faced a second consecutive defeat. I want to say here as well that it would not have happened, sir, the last election. I have the opportunity and a humble privilege, sir, to travel across this region consulting with other political parties. And I want to say that I don't believe it would have happened in the last general election had not the former opposition leader crossed the floor and eject the then president of the Democratic Labour Party from his seat. In fact, sir, the two honorable senators to my left may not have been here. I am of the opinion that by virtue there would not have been more former members of the Democratic Labour Party sitting in this chamber, that around this table, that is, had that not occurred either. So I have my reservations, and I will continue to listen to this debate before I make any conclusion. And I will do so with a sense of understanding that this is a serious constitutional matter. With that, sir, I'm much obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Jamal Sloan. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that this sitting of the Senate be suspended for lunch to resume at 3 p.m.
The question is that the Honourable Senator do now be suspended until 3 p.m. today. Will those Honourable Senators in favour please say aye? Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is currently suspended until 3 p.m. today.